Some invitations aren't about meeting someone new, they're about proving you were never meant to belong. The conference room had already emptied, the echo of polished shoes fading into the quiet hum of central air, leaving behind the faint scent of expensive coffee and something colder, something sharper, like expectation that lingered in the glass walls. Marcus Hale stood alone near the long walnut table, stacking folders with steady hands, his movements unhurried, precise. Like a man who had learned not to rush through spaces that weren't built for him, the skyline outside stretching wide in late afternoon light, all steel and reflection, a world that moved faster than most people could keep up with, but not him, not today. He adjusted the alignment of the last document, fingertips brushing the smooth paper, then paused, sensing it before hearing it, the shift in air behind him, the quiet presence of someone who never needed to announce herself. "My father wants to meet you," Evelyn Carter said, her voice low, almost too soft for a room designed to carry power, not whispers, and yet it landed with weight, precise, intentional, like something placed rather than spoken. Marcus didn't turn right away, didn't flinch, didn't react the way most people did when addressed by someone like her, someone whose name sat on the building itself, whose decisions moved numbers that most people only read about. Instead, he stood there for a breath longer than expected, eyes on the table, on the reflection of the city folded into its polished surface, as if measuring the sentence for what it was worth before acknowledging it at all. "That sounds like a job interview," he said finally, his voice even, calm, not dismissive, not impressed, just level, the kind of tone that didn't rise to meet authority or shrink beneath it. Behind him, there was the faintest shift, a pause that didn't belong to someone used to immediate compliance. Evelyn stepping closer, the soft click of her heels muted now against the thick carpet, her reflection appearing beside his in the glass panel across the room, sharp lines, tailored edges, control in every detail, and yet something in her posture didn't quite match the sentence she had just delivered. "It's not what you think," she replied, but there was a fraction of a second before the words came out, a hesitation so small it could be missed if you weren't looking for it, if you hadn't spent years reading what people didn't say. Marcus let out a quiet breath through his nose, not quite a sigh, more like acknowledgement, then reached for the final folder, aligning it with the others, finishing the task before giving the moment more than it had already taken. Outside, a siren wailed faintly somewhere below, distant, irrelevant, the city continuing its endless motion while inside the room, time felt slower, stretched thin between two people who stood on opposite ends of something neither of them had named yet. "Then tell me what it is," he said, turning just enough to face her now, not fully, not confrontational, but present, his expression unreadable in the reflection, eyes steady, waiting, not for permission, not for approval, but for something honest, something that didn't come wrapped in titles or expectations. Evelyn held his gaze for a moment longer than necessary, the silence settling between them, not empty, but full of something unspoken, something that pressed gently at the edges of control, and for the first time since she had walked into the room, she didn't have an answer ready. The silence did not break all at once, it thinned, like ice under weight, and Evelyn's gaze shifted for just a fraction before returning to him, sharper now, but not colder, just more careful. She drew in a slow breath, the kind people take when they are about to say something they cannot quite control, and for a moment her hand moved as if to reach for the edge of the table, then stopped halfway, fingers curling slightly instead, as though even that small gesture felt too exposed. "It is not about you," she said, but the words did not land the way she intended, not clean, not convincing, and she seemed to hear it herself because her jaw tightened just enough to show it. Marcus did not react, did not challenge it, he simply waited, his posture unchanged, shoulders relaxed, eyes steady in a way that made silence feel like a mirror rather than a gap. Outside, the light shifted lower, casting long lines across the floor, stretching both of their reflections across the glass, distorting them just enough to make it unclear where one ended and the other began. "He asked about you," she added after a moment, quieter now, less certain, and that was new, not the authority people expected from her, but something closer to explanation, or maybe justification. Marcus tilted his head slightly, not confused, just processing. then asked. What did you tell him? And the question was simple, almost gentle, but it landed differently, because it was not about the father at all, it was about her, about the version of him she had already chosen to present. Evelyn's lips parted, then closed again, and for the first time since she entered the room, she did not have control of the pacing, of the direction, of the outcome, and it showed in the smallest ways. The way her shoulders lowered a fraction, the way her eyes did not hold his as firmly. I told him you were reliable, she said, and the word hung there, too narrow for everything it was supposed to carry, like it had been chosen quickly, safely. Marcus let out a quiet breath, almost a soft exhale of air that carried no judgment, only recognition, then nodded once, slow, measured, as if placing that word somewhere in a larger picture. Reliable is what people say when they do not know what else to call you, he replied, not bitter, not dismissive, just honest. And the honesty did not push, it settled, steady and immovable. Evelyn's eyes flickered, not away, but inward, like she was replaying something she had already said, something she could not take back, and the room seemed smaller now, not physically, but emotionally, the distance between them reduced to something neither of them had planned. Somewhere down the hallway, a door closed softly, the sound muted, distant. And yet it marked the world continuing beyond this moment, beyond this conversation, beyond whatever this was becoming. Marcus shifted his weight slightly, finally turning more fully toward her, not stepping closer, not stepping back, just aligning himself with the conversation in a way that made it clear he was not leaving, but he was not stepping into anything undefined either. So your father wants to meet someone reliable, he said, the faintest trace of something thoughtful in his tone, not sarcasm, not curiosity, something quieter than both. That sounds like his need, not mine. And there it was, not a refusal, not yet, but a boundary, drawn without force, without volume, just clarity. Evelyn stood still, the words settling over her in layers, and for the first time the weight of the invitation shifted, no longer something she was offering from above, but something she was now holding in both hands, uncertain what it actually meant, or why she had brought it here at all. The room did not feel like a conference room anymore. It felt like a space where something unspoken had been placed between them and neither of them was quite sure how to move around it, and Marcus could see it now, not in her words, but in the way Evelyn held herself, just slightly off from the precision she carried everywhere else, like a note that had slipped out of tune and had not yet been corrected. He glanced once toward the glass wall where the city stretched out in clean lines and distant motion, then back at her, measuring not the request, but the person behind it, and for a moment he said nothing, letting the quiet do what it always did, reveal what pressure could not. You did not answer my question, he said finally, his voice low, steady, not pushing, just returning the conversation to where it had been left unfinished, and it landed gently but firmly, like a hand placed on a door that someone had tried to close too quickly. Evelyn's shoulders shifted, not dramatically, just enough to show the effort of holding something in place, and when she spoke again, her tone had changed, less polished, less rehearsed, more human. He thinks people are easy to read, she said, her eyes drifting for a second toward the skyline before coming back to Marcus. He believes if you look at someone long enough, you can tell how long they will stay. And the words carried something quieter underneath them, not just about her father, but about herself, about a belief she had lived with long enough that it no longer felt like a belief at all. Marcus listened without interruption, his expression unchanged, but there was a shift in his gaze now, not softer, not harder, just more focused, like he had found the thread that mattered. And what do you believe? He asked, and the question did not come fast, it came after a pause that made it clear he was not asking out of curiosity, but out of intention. Evelyn did not answer right away, and that silence stretched longer than any of the ones before it, because this time it was not about control or timing, it was about something she did not say often, maybe something she did not say at all. Her hand finally rested against the edge of the table, fingertips pressing lightly into the wood as if grounding herself in something solid. I think people leave when they are asked to prove they should stay, she said quietly, and the sentence did not sound like theory, it sounded like memory, like something learned. not chosen. Marcus's eyes held hers for a moment longer, and then he nodded once, not in agreement, not in dismissal, but in recognition, as if he understood the weight of that sentence without needing it explained. He took a small step back, creating just a bit more space between them, not distance, just room for clarity. "Then you already know what this is," he said, his voice calm, almost gentle. "It is not a meeting, it is a test." And he let that settle before adding, "And I do not take tests I did not sign up for." The words simple, direct, but not harsh, not final, just true. Evelyn inhaled slowly, her posture straightening out of instinct, out of habit, but the expression in her eyes did not return to what it had been before. Something had shifted there, something that did not fit back into the structure she was used to. "It is not for him," she said after a moment, and this time there was no hesitation, no pause before the words, just quiet certainty. "It is for me." And that was the first time she had said something that did not belong to her title, or her position, or her control. It belonged to her alone. Marcus studied her for a second, not searching for weakness, not questioning intent, just seeing, and in that moment the room felt still again, but not tense, not uncertain, just honest, in a way it had not been before. The words stayed in the air longer than either of them expected, not heavy, not dramatic, just present, like something finally said out loud that had been waiting for the right moment to exist, and Marcus did not respond immediately, not because he did not hear her, but because he did, fully, and that required something different than a quick answer. His gaze shifted briefly toward the city again, the late light now dipping lower, turning glass into gold, the reflections stretching across the room in quiet symmetry, and for a second it looked like two worlds layered on top of each other, one built on motion, the other on stillness. "For you," he repeated, not questioning, just placing the words where they belonged, and when he looked back at her, there was no edge in his expression, no resistance, just the kind of clarity that did not need to raise its voice. Evelyn held his gaze this time without looking away, but the steadiness she was used to felt different now, less like control, and more like exposure, as if she had stepped into a space where titles did not translate the way they used to. "He has never approved of anyone I chose," she said, and the sentence came out more direct than anything before it, stripped of explanation, stripped of context, just truth, simple and unguarded, and it settled between them without asking for permission. Marcus nodded slowly, not surprised, not impressed, just understanding the shape of that kind of expectation, the kind that did not come with instructions, only consequences. "So you want him to see something different," he said, and it was not framed as a question, but as an observation, one that landed gently but accurately, like placing a piece into a puzzle that had been missing it. Evelyn's lips pressed together for a moment, then relaxed, and there was a faint shift in her posture, like she had stopped holding something up and was letting it rest where it actually belonged. "I want him to be wrong," she replied, and there it was, not about Marcus, not about the meeting, but about a lifetime of needing to prove something to someone who never quite gave her the space to exist without judgment. The room grew quieter, not because there was nothing left to say, but because what had been said mattered enough to take its time settling. Marcus studied her for a second longer, not with curiosity, not with doubt, but with a kind of measured respect for the honesty it took to say that out loud, especially for someone who did not need to explain herself to anyone. He shifted his weight slightly, one hand resting against the back of a chair, grounding himself in something familiar, something simple, before he spoke again. "And where do I fit in that?" he asked, the question calm, direct, not defensive, just necessary, because the answer would define everything that came after. Evelyn did not hesitate this time, but the answer did not come quickly either. It came carefully, like she was choosing each word not for impact, but for truth. "You do not," she said, and the honesty of it did not cut, it clarified. "Not the way he thinks, not the way I used to." And her voice softened just enough to carry something more than logic, something closer to realization. Marcus let out a quiet breath, the faintest hint of a smile touching one corner of his mouth, not amusement, not satisfaction, just recognition of something aligning the way it should. "Then maybe that is the point," he said, straightening slightly, his tone steady, grounded. If I walk into that room, it should not be to prove him wrong. He paused, just long enough for the thought to settle. It should be to show that he is asking the wrong question. And the words did not rise, they did not push, they simply landed, firm and clear, and for the first time since she had spoken that initial sentence, Evelyn did not look like someone managing a situation, she looked like someone seeing it differently. The air in the room shifted again, not with tension, but with something quieter, something that felt like alignment slowly taking shape, and Evelyn did not speak right away, not because she did not have words, but because for the first time, she was not trying to control how they would land. Her gaze lingered on Marcus, studying him in a way that was no longer analytical, no longer strategic, but personal, like she was seeing him outside of context, outside of role, and that was unfamiliar territory for someone who had built her life on defining everything before it could define her. He does not ask questions, she said finally, her voice softer than before, almost reflective. He decides, and then he looks for proof that he was right. And there was no bitterness in it, no anger, just a quiet acknowledgement of a pattern that had shaped more than she used to admit. Marcus nodded once, his expression unchanged, but there was a subtle shift in his posture, a steadiness that came from understanding something without needing to fix it, and he let the silence stretch just long enough for her words to settle fully before responding. Then walking into that room will not change him, he said, calm, direct, not dismissive. It will only show you what you already know. And the sentence did not close the door, it clarified it, made the shape of it visible. Evelyn's eyes lowered for a moment, not in avoidance, but in thought, her hands still resting lightly against the edge of the table, fingertips tracing a line she had not noticed before, as if grounding herself in something simple while everything else shifted around her. I am not trying to change him, she replied, and when she looked back up, there was something steadier in her gaze now, something chosen rather than inherited. I am trying to stop needing him to agree. And the words did not come out perfectly, but they came out honestly, and that made them land in a way nothing else had so far. Marcus watched her for a second, really watched her, not as someone above him, not as someone asking something of him, but as a person standing in front of a realization she had carried for years without naming it, and he gave a small nod, slow, deliberate, like placing respect exactly where it belonged. That is different, he said, and there was a quiet weight in that sentence, not approval, not praise, just recognition. Outside, the light had shifted further, the sky now a muted blend of fading gold and early blue, the kind of evening that made everything feel a little more still than usual, and inside the room, that stillness had settled between them as something steady rather than uncertain. Marcus straightened slightly, one hand brushing lightly against the back of the chair before dropping to his side, a small, grounding motion, and when he spoke again, his voice carried the same calm clarity it had from the beginning. But now there was something else beneath it, something more defined. If I go, he said, and the words were measured, intentional, it will not be as an answer to him. He paused, just long enough for the meaning to take shape. And it will not be to fill a role you need him to see. And his eyes held hers, steady, unwavering. It will be because you asked, not as a CEO, not as a test, but as yourself. And the sentence did not rise, did not push, it simply stood there, clear and complete. Evelyn did not respond immediately, but the way she looked at him changed, not dramatically, not visibly to anyone else, but enough to show that something had shifted from expectation to understanding, and for the first time since she walked into that room, she was not measuring what she could gain from the moment, she was recognizing what it actually meant. Then I am asking, she said quietly, and there was no authority in it now, no structure, no control, just a simple request, unprotected, unpolished, real, and in that moment the distance between them did not disappear. But it no longer felt like a barrier, it felt like space that could be crossed, if chosen. Marcus did not answer right away, not because he needed time to decide, but because he understood what a real request sounded like, and this was different from everything that had come before. There was no structure around it, no expectation dressed as opportunity, just a simple ask, and that changed the weight of it entirely. He held her gaze for a moment, steady, grounded, as if making sure the moment stayed exactly as it was, unfiltered, unprotected, before letting his eyes drift briefly toward the window where the last light of day softened the edges of the city into something quieter, something less demanding. "You are not asking for a favor," he said finally, his voice low, measured, not questioning, just clarifying. "You are asking for presence." And the distinction mattered not because it made the request bigger, but because it made it real. Evelyn did not interrupt, did not correct him, she simply listened, her posture no longer held by habit but by attention, the kind that does not rush to respond, and in that stillness, something about her felt less distant, less defined by the space she usually occupied. Marcus took a slow breath, one hand resting briefly against the edge of the table before dropping back to his side, grounding himself in something simple, something known, and when he spoke again, his tone did not change, but the meaning behind it deepened. "I do not walk into rooms to be measured," he continued, each word placed carefully, not to persuade, but to be understood. "And I do not stand in front of someone so they can decide if I am worth staying." And there was no anger in it, no edge, just truth shaped by experience, by years of understanding what it meant to be seen through someone else's expectations. Evelyn's expression shifted, not dramatically, but enough to show that she heard the difference between resistance and boundary, and for the first time, she did not try to move around it, she stayed with it. "I am not asking you to do that," she said quietly, and there was no hesitation now, no pause before the words, just intention. "I am asking you to stand there as yourself, nothing more, nothing less." And the simplicity of it did not weaken the request, it strengthened it, because it left no room for performance. Marcus studied her for a second longer, not searching for inconsistency, not testing her words, just observing the way she held them, and what he saw was not control, not expectation, but something steadier, something chosen, and that mattered. The room felt quieter now, not because there was less to say, but because what had been said no longer needed to compete with anything else, it simply existed, clear and present. He nodded once, slow, deliberate, the kind of nod that did not rush ahead of thought but followed it fully, and when he spoke again, his voice carried the same calm certainty it had from the beginning, but now it held a decision. "Then I will meet him," he said, and the words were simple, direct, but they did not carry obligation, they carried choice. "Not to answer his question," he added after a brief pause, his eyes steady on hers. "And not to change what he believes." And there was a quiet firmness in that, not defensive, just clear. "But to stand there the same way I stand here." And the meaning settled between them without needing to be explained further. Evelyn exhaled slowly, not relief exactly, but something close to it, something that came from being met without being managed, and for a moment, either of them moved, either of them spoke, because the moment did not require anything more. Outside, the city lights began to come alive, one by one, small points of brightness against the darkening sky. And inside the room, something just as quiet had shifted, not dramatically, not visibly, but enough to change what came next. They did not leave the room right away, and that in itself said something, because most conversations like this ended quickly, efficiently, tied off with a decision and a schedule, but this one lingered, not out of uncertainty, but because either of them felt the need to rush past what had just settled between them. Evelyn shifted slightly, her hand finally lifting from the table as if she no longer needed the support. Her posture returning to its usual composure, but not completely, not in the way it had been before. There was something softer in it now, something less guarded. "Tomorrow evening," she said after a moment, her voice steady again, but different, not rehearsed, not controlled, just clear. 7 o'clock, his place, Upper West Side. And the details came naturally, but they did not carry the same weight they would have earlier. They felt like logistics, not conditions. Marcus nodded once, the information settling into place without effort, and for a brief second, his eyes lowered as if mentally aligning it with everything else his day would hold, the kind of quiet calculation that came from balancing more than one life at once. "I will need to be out by 9. he said, simple, direct, not apologetic, just factual. My daughter has school in the morning. And there was no explanation beyond that, no elaboration, because there did not need to be. The sentence stood on its own, grounded in something real. Evelyn's expression shifted again, not surprise exactly, but awareness, as if the mention of someone else, someone outside this room, reframed the entire situation in a way she had not fully considered before. Of course, she replied, and the words came quickly, but there was thought behind them, a recognition of boundaries that were not negotiable, not here, not anywhere. Marcus gave a small nod, acknowledging the understanding, and for a moment neither of them spoke again, the quiet settling into something almost comfortable, not empty, not tense, just present. Outside, the last of the daylight had faded, replaced by the steady glow of the city at night, each window a small, separate story, each light a reminder that life continued in 1,000 different directions at once. Marcus reached for his jacket draped over the back of the chair, lifting it with a smooth, practiced motion, the fabric falling into place over his shoulders without thought, and as he adjusted the sleeves slightly, his movements remained unhurried, deliberate, like everything else about him. You do not have to prepare anything for me, he said, glancing back at Evelyn, his tone calm, almost matter-of-fact. I will show up as I am. And the sentence carried more meaning than it appeared to at first, because it removed any space for adjustment, for presentation, for anything other than truth. Evelyn watched him for a moment, the simplicity of that statement landing deeper than any structured answer could have, and she gave a small nod, not out of agreement, but out of understanding, the kind that did not need to be spoken aloud. That is exactly what I need, she said, quietly, and this time there was no hesitation at all, no second layer behind the words, just intention. Marcus paused for a brief second, his hand resting lightly against the back of the chair as if marking the end of the moment, then straightened fully, his gaze steady one last time, not searching, not questioning, just present. Then I will see you tomorrow, he said, and there was no formality in it, no distance, just a simple acknowledgement of what had been set in motion. Evelyn held his gaze for a second longer, and in that second, something unspoken passed between them, not dramatic, not defined, just understood, and as Marcus turned toward the door, his steps quiet, measured, the room did not feel the same as it had when he first walked in, not because anything had changed physically, but because something within it had shifted, something neither of them would be able to return to once the door closed behind him. The door closed softly behind Marcus, the sound barely louder than the quiet hum of the building settling into evening, and for a moment Evelyn did not move. She stood exactly where he had left her, eyes fixed not on the door, but on the space just before it, as if something of him still occupied it, something that had not fully left with his footsteps. The room felt larger now, not emptier, but more honest, stripped of the structure she usually relied on, and she let out a slow breath she had not realized she was holding, her shoulders lowering slightly as the tension she carried without noticing began to loosen. She walked toward the window without thinking, heels soft against the carpet, and stopped just inches from the glass. The city stretched out before her in layers of light and motion, each window lit with its own story, its own rhythm, and for the first time that day, she was not looking at it as something to manage, something to control. She was simply looking. Her reflection stared back at her, sharp, composed, familiar, and yet something in her expression did not match the version of herself she had carried into that room earlier. There was a quiet shift in her eyes, something less guarded, less certain, but not weaker, just different. You asked? She murmured under her breath, not as a question, but as a realization, as if repeating it helped her understand the weight of what she had done, the simplicity of it, the risk of it, and the truth behind it. Her phone buzzed lightly against the table behind her, the sound sharp in the quiet room, pulling her back just enough to remind her of the world that did not pause for reflection, and when she turned, the screen lit with a name she knew too well, one that carried expectation without needing to say a word. She did not pick it up immediately, she let it ring once, twice, the vibration steady, insistent, before finally crossing the room and lifting it from the table, her fingers resting on the edge of the device as if considering not the call, but how she would answer it. "Yes," she said after a brief pause, her voice calm, composed, but no longer carrying the same automatic precision it once did. There was something more grounded in it now, something chosen. The voice on the other end spoke quickly, controlled, familiar, asking questions that sounded less like curiosity and more like confirmation, and Evelyn listened without interrupting, her gaze drifting once more toward the window, toward the reflection that now felt slightly unfamiliar in its honesty. "Tomorrow," she said simply, cutting through the flow of words without raising her voice, without forcing the moment, just placing her answer where it needed to be. 7 o'clock. And there was no elaboration, no justification, just clarity. The response on the other end paused, not long, but long enough to notice, and when it continued, there was a subtle shift in tone, something closer to curiosity now, something that had not been there before. Evelyn's fingers tightened slightly around the phone, not from tension, but from awareness, and when she spoke again, her words came slower, more deliberate. "He is not coming to be evaluated," she said, her eyes steady on her own reflection now, not avoiding it, not adjusting it, just seeing it as it was. "He is coming as himself." And the sentence landed with a quiet firmness that did not ask for agreement. The voice on the other end did not respond immediately, and in that silence, Evelyn felt something unfamiliar settle into place, not control, not defiance, but something steadier, something that did not depend on how the conversation ended. She lowered the phone slightly, listening, then nodded once, not because she was being told something new, but because she had already decided what mattered. "I understand," she said finally, her tone unchanged, calm, grounded, and when the call ended, she did not move right away. She simply stood there, the phone resting loosely in her hand, her reflection still watching her from the glass. Outside, the city lights continued to flicker and shift, unaware of the quiet change that had just taken place inside a single room, and Evelyn Carter, standing alone in that space, did not feel like she had lost control of anything. She felt like she had finally stepped out of something she had been holding for far too long. The next evening arrived without announcement, just a quiet shift in the air as daylight faded into the kind of blue that softened edges and slowed everything down, and Marcus Hale stepped out of the subway into the Upper West Side with the same steady pace he carried everywhere else, his jacket resting clean on his shoulders, his shoes worn but polished, his presence simple, unaltered, exactly as he had said it would be. The street was lined with tall buildings that carried history in their stone, their windows glowing warm against the cool evening, and he paused for a brief second at the corner, not to hesitate, but to orient, to take in the space before stepping into it, the kind of quiet habit that came from moving through places that were not always built with him in mind. A doorman nodded as he approached, not overly familiar, not dismissive, just acknowledging, and Marcus returned it with the same calm respect. Nothing more, nothing less, before stepping inside where the air changed, warmer, quieter, carrying the faint scent of polished wood and something expensive that did not need to prove itself. Upstairs, Evelyn stood near the window of a room that overlooked the same city now stretching in deeper shades of night, her posture composed, but not rigid, her hands resting lightly at her sides, not holding anything, not bracing against anything, just present. She had not changed the room for this. Not the lighting, not the arrangement, nothing that would turn the moment into something staged, because she understood now that he would see through that, and more importantly, she no longer wanted to. The sound of footsteps approached, measured, steady, and when the door opened, Marcus entered without hesitation, not slow, not fast, just on time, and for a second either of them spoke, not because there was tension, but because there was clarity. The kind that did not need to be filled immediately. Her father stood near the far side of the room, posture straight, expression controlled, the kind of presence that had shaped rooms long before anyone else stepped into them, and his eyes moved to Marcus with quiet assessment, not hostile, not welcoming, simply measuring. Marcus met the gaze without resistance, without performance, just steady, the same way he had stood in every other room, and he did not step forward right away. He did not rush to fill the space. He simply existed within it, grounded, unaltered. Evelyn watched the moment unfold from where she stood, not intervening, not guiding, just observing, and for the first time, she did not feel the need to manage what came next, because she understood now that it was not hers to control. "You made it," her father said finally, his voice even, carrying the weight of someone used to being heard, and Marcus gave a small nod, not submissive, not defiant, just acknowledging the statement for what it was. "I said I would," he replied, his tone calm, clear, and the simplicity of it did not shrink under the room, it held its place within it. There was a brief silence after that, not awkward, not forced, just real, and in that silence, something subtle shifted, not in the room, but in the way it was being held, because for the